In tonight's episode of the Walk and Talk, Alone in the Dark. The year is 1925. A car is driving on the beaten track somewhere between Louisiana swamps. There is a man sitting on a passenger seat. His name is Edward Carnby. He wears a green jacket and fluffy red mustache. He has an arrogant, yet a bit tired expression on his face. This is the face of a man who will not raise his butt from a chair unless he gets paid to do that. But let's give him a chance to introduce himself.
On my door, a dull brass plate says Private Detective. The few friends I have call me Carnby. The others call me the Reptile. I don't care to think what my banker calls me. These days, I leave my letters unopened. Bills and threats to send in the receivers just ruin my day. When an antique dealer called Gloria Allen contacted me, I slipped into my best shirt, holstered my .38, and got to her shop as fast as I could. I was expecting something sordid. Blackmail, probably. Boy, was I wrong. What I was asked to do was visit a property called Dersetto and find a piano in the loft. It was an old piano with secret drawers. The kind people who buy stuff in antique stores go crazy over. The Dersetto house is supposed to be piled high with classy junk. Furniture, books, paintings. It looked like whoever owned Dersetto was about to get cleaned out. I was going to bring up the subject of money when Gloria Allen handed me $150 and a key. I kept myself from grinning at the thought of my banker's surprise. He doesn't like his victims getting away. I looked over a copy of the police report. The former owner of Dersetto, a guy called J. Hartwood, had hanged himself in the loft. The coroner concluded it was a clear-cut case of suicide. I promised Gloria Allen I'd give the place a look over. My report will be ready in a couple of days. I've been reading up on the history of the old house. It's the kind of place ghosts run away from in terror. Grisly murders, curses, lunacy. Luckily, devil worship makes me smile, so this is my idea of a paid vacation.
When the car finally stopped by the driveway, driver refused to go any further. Superstitious redneck, Edward thought, and walked towards the entrance. Indeed, the Dersetto estate looked impressive against the background of the gloomy evening sky. There was a light burning in the attic window, giving the house impression of a lighthouse, drawing unlucky travelers into its net. With heavy steps he entered the double doors of the manor, as if into the jaws of a huge carpenter's monster. He made a few steps through the darkness of the hall, as heard how doors shut down with a squeak. "These jokes don't work on me," said Edward, but brows heavily knitted on detective's forehead. Someone is definitely here. He felt watched. Am I too late? And someone already caught a wind that there is some good money can be made with antiques. I'll be damned if I let it slide under my nose. Newspaper obituaries that he had read in the city archives came to mind. The few who owned the estate died under strange circumstances. The first owner who built this house, Elia Pickford, died in a skirmish with Union soldiers, during which the mansion burned to the ground. All that remained of the estate was purchased and rebuilt by one Howard Hartwood, father of Jeremy Hartwood, who had recently hanged himself in the attic. Howard also died under mysterious circumstances, according to the coroner's report. He bit his tongue and choked on his own blood. Somewhere deep inside, he hoped to meet a human face in the attic. Be that a burglar or a squatter, doesn't matter, at least he'll not be alone. He will never admit that, but the house was pressing at him. It's just an old building, but he felt like he was walking on a tight stream, and at any moment he will be caught in a snare. Meanwhile, there was no one in the attic. The light was still on, illuminating the central part of the room. Edward looked around. Anybody home? No response. There was an old oil lamp on the table nearby. If I can fill it with oil, it will become a faithful ally against the dark corners of this house. There was a subtle movement in the window opposite the table. What is it? Edward decided to take a closer look, when suddenly the figure grew in size and the window shattered into pieces. Giant zombie chicken, clattering its sharp-toothed jaws, jumped at him. However, as it jumped, it was met with a strong kick. It flew back, shook its head, and tried to attack again, but Edward's boot met her in the same place. This time, upon landing, it froze, twitched, and evaporated, leaving behind only a cloud of dark bubbles. What on earth was that? He decided to end the purpose of his trip and get away as quickly as possible, but as he approached the piano, the floor shook under his feet. He stepped back, and at that moment the hatch in the floor swung open. Along with the grave air, the half-rotten face of a dead man appeared from the hatch. With blazing yellow eyes, the ghoul extended his monstrously long arms and walked towards Edward, clearly without intention to shake his hand. Edward had to fight due to his line of work, and he was considered a good boxer, but he had never had to spar with the undead before. As it turned out, several strong right hooks worked the same on the representatives of subterranean creatures. When Ghoul burst into a dozen purple bubbles, the detective silently walked up to the piano. Gloria Allen's order no longer mattered, but a hunch told him that he might find the clue here to what was going on with this house. Feeling for a secret panel on the side, he pulled out a letter.
They are coming! I have freed hellish forces, and now the price must be paid. Derceto is the prey of evil. The sun has set. They will find my body, but will not have my soul. I can imagine the master's fury and the terror in the hearts of his slaves. I hear their footsteps. Some may understand what I have done. May God forgive me. Farewell, Jeremy Hartwood.
Under normal circumstances, Carnby would have laughed at such letter. Some aristocrat who spent too much time in the isolation of the fictional worlds of his library drove himself to madness and suicide. Good riddance, buddy. But in the current situation, there was no smile on his face. He saw what he saw. He heard the walls creak and groan, wanting to crush him. A sense of danger crawled under his shirt and wrapped its ice-cold arms tightly around him. Having examined the attic, he took with him an old rifle, in case his feats turned out to be not a strong enough argument in a dispute with the undead, as well as an Indian cover, as an additional advance to the suddenly complicated case. Edward went down from the attic to the third floor. On the way, he filled the lamp with oil and grabbed a bow from the closet. The floor in the hallway wasn't trustworthy. The boards looked rotten, one wrong step and he could have fallen through. It was worth looking for an alternative route through the interconnecting rooms, in one of which he found an old cavalry saber. It was in a poor condition, the weapon had clearly not been cared for, and judging by the marks on the blade, it had been hanging somewhere as a decoration for a long time. Still worth taking it. Zombies began to wait for Edward at every step. Fortunately, they appeared one at a time and were terribly slow, which made it possible to fight back and get a good look at them. Judging by the clothes, this was once a servant. It's interesting that the fate of Jeremy's servants was unknown. The police report said nothing about them. They could have left their master, or maybe they never existed. When his body was discovered, the house was already empty. Could it be that he escaped retribution, but his servants turned out to be the victims of the evil that he was so afraid of? Walking into the bedroom, one could hear the menacing barking of dogs outside the window. This is some kind of Resident Evil, Edward thought. Suddenly, a creepy chicken flew into the window. After introducing her teeth to the boot, the detective hurried out of the bedroom and back into the hallway. Once on the landing, the blood drained from his face. Both passages to the stairs were blocked by purple figures with huge wings, red horns and long clawed fingers along which blood flowed. They stood motionless. They had no faces, which caused confusion in the victim's mind. Edward did not dare raise his eyes, examining them only furtively. He remembered reading about something similar in the notes of an unknown author called The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadat. These creatures seem to be called night guns. To engage them in open battle will be suicide, but sometimes a shield turned out to be a better weapon than a sword. As Perseus said when preparing to meet the Medusa, take up your bronze shields and polish them until they shine like mirrors. Armed with 2 mirrors, obtained earlier from the bedroom, he placed them in front of each of the creatures. An agonizing scream filled the room. Edward pressed his back against the wall, unable to take his eyes off how each of these demons was being torn away from the human dimension by incredible force. When the path was clear, he carefully descended to the 2nd floor. On the stairs, he caught a glance of a spacious library, but the doors to it slammed shut before he could go down. Someone clearly doesn't want me there. I need to find a way in. Having descended, he turned right from the knight's armor, going into the living room. It was a small room. Opposite the door he saw a gramophone on the table, and as a great connoisseur of music, he decided to take it with him. Only when he turned to the fireplace, he discovered that the ghost of a woman was sitting motionless in the opposite chair. "I beg your pardon, madam," Edward muttered and hurried away so as not to disturb the lady's peace. The opposite wing of the 2nd floor consisted of a winding corridor leading to various rooms. Behind the first door was a guest room, where the detective discovered the diary of the last owner of Derceto.
Diary of Jeremy Hartwood, September 27th, 1924. I have decided to keep this diary. Too many inexplicable events have taken place recently. Never have dreams so haunted my every waking moment. Perhaps my romantic mind was too dull, and has only now woken up to these new paths and visions. Some, seeing my recent paintings, may question my sanity. I can only ask them, what is sanity? Where does madness begin? September 28th, 1924. The night is pitch black. I am again drenched in sweat. I was wandering in the dunes, among giant standing stones. They were arranged in a circle, and the wind whistled about them. I plunged my hand into the soil and felt that repulsive thing which was trying to catch me. It seized me. I struggled to break free of its loathsome embrace and managed to tear my hand away. It was covered in sticky substance. I was gripping a knife. October 5th, 1924. The stone circle is a pentacle. Derceto's library is filled with books on the occult. I will study those books until I find some explanation for the dreams. The visions that haunt me must be connected to my discoveries. I shall have to undertake a profound exploration of my dreams. December 16th. Dear God, I have found the knife. It was hidden here, and what I have learned fills me with apprehension. It is a sacrificial dagger belonging to some unholy cult. The thought of that blade tearing through human flesh horrifies me, yet I must continue my research. Derceto is a storehouse of treasures. Was my father right after all? January 23rd. I spend all my days plunged in dusty books. The servants are convinced I am mad. At night, I awaken them with my screams. The dreams are draining what sanity I still have. I have tried staying awake, but in vain. My visions have changed. No doubt the influence of my father's research. February 7th, 1925. The Dark Man, that is what I call him, has revealed his true face to me. He appeared, as usual, near the fireplace, but this time he approached me. His terrible smile will haunt me to my dying day. His breath was ice, and his burning eyes froze me. I could not move. I know, as surely as I have ever known anything, that the face I saw, the face that has turned my nights into hellish torture, is the mask of death. March 10th. My exhaustion is beyond description. The endless reading burns my eyes. It seems that pirates frequented the area. Dr. Herbert insists I keep to my bed. I have moved to another bedroom and sleep much better now. The Dark Man has not gone, however. I know it. He will wait for as long as he must. Unless I, Jeremy Hartwood, can find a way to send him back to whatever hell he comes from. March 11th. My poor knowledge of Greek and Latin is a serious handicap to my reading. I have, nevertheless, made a great step forward. I drew the symbol on the floor. He can no longer go there. I want him to understand that I can do the same thing in my bedroom. I can imagine his rage and frustration. Only last night he found his way back into my dreams. March 13th. The translation will seriously dent what money I have left. I cannot paint. My pictures are clearly the work of a lunatic. The collector Thornhill's embarrassed smile was proof of that. March 29th. He has come back. He found the door to my dreams. I am too weary to attempt any defense. I have no strength left to fight, and he knows it. He considers me dead already. Could I possibly? March 30th. How ironic! The cave my father sought for so many years is here, beneath the house. Waits. The butler discovered a crack in the cellar wall. A breeze blows in through it, icy and repugnant. I am filled with horror at the thought of my father dying in this place. I will carry to my grave the vision of his face contorted in the agony of that fatal heart attack. His body was twisted. He had webbed. His fingernails were torn and bloody from scrabbling at the floor. Dr. Gray concluded that death had been due to a heart attack. It was Waits, who some time later was informed that my poor father had in fact bitten off his tongue and choked on his own blood. March 31st. I explored the caverns in a dream. The Dark Man came with me. Strangely, I felt almost well. How can I describe what I saw? No. What words are capable of explaining such evil? I realized that my death was of no interest to him. The Dark Man wants something else.
He seeks a body. His avid servants are now free. I am the cause. It is almost funny. Curses on Derceto. From the foundations to the very rooftop, I can no longer struggle, let alone eradicate the evil that grips the house. The end is very near, I can feel it. I have taken the decision to... May he who finds this diary pray for my soul.
This story made Edward's stomach churn, but the toilet was already occupied by the monster. "1,000 apologies," mumbled Carnby. He quickly grabbed the chamber pot and headed into the next room to get some privacy. It was dark and scary inside. To correct at least one of the above, he lit a lamp. A heavy statue caught an eye. Edward realized that this was exactly the kind of statue he needed in his office to make it completely figure. Returning to the main staircase, he found out that the only thing better than the statue would be knight's armor. So he decided to take that too. But the armor disagreed with that decision and attacked the detective. Confused, he threw a heavy statue at them. The statue and armor were destroyed, but the excellent sword survived. Armed and dangerous, he went down to the first floor. In the next room there was a greenhouse with a statue of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. At her feet symbolically lay 3 arrows, what was needed for the bow that had been found earlier. As soon as he lifted them, a hail of spiders rained down on him. Edward ran out of the greenhouse. He could engage in hand-to-hand combat with the ghouls, knock on the teeth of overgrown chickens, as well as confrontation with cosmic horrors, voodoo, and other evil spirits, but spiders? This was already too much. There was a kitchen in the opposite room. Soup was heating up on the fireplace. As someone who had been subsisting on the Chinese takeout and coffee for the past few months, Carnby couldn't resist grabbing some home-cooked food. There was some possibility of human flesh in the soup, but Edward tried to be open-minded. At the back of the kitchen there was a door to the storeroom, where in an unremarkable pile of coal lay an unremarkable shoebox, which in turn contained a very remarkable revolver. Walking further down the corridor, he found himself in the dining room, where a group of zombies were waiting for their order. Given that the service at the house was below average, one could assume that they were still alive when they ordered the food. Taking pity on the hungry ghouls, Edward put the soup on the table. "Fall to, boys!" Someone was smoking Icos in the next room. The stench was so terrible that extinguishing the ashtray from a used chamber pot seemed quite acceptable. He found the music record in the drawers nearby, and before returning to investigation, he allowed himself to lose himself to dance to Opus 69. Carnby knew that until he solved the Derceto's mystery, he would not be able to get out of here. The detective's instinct told him that something terrible was waiting for him behind the front doors. No, first we need to figure out where the roots of evil in this house come from. He needed to find a way to the library. He returned to the second floor and entered the gallery that ran around the entire wing of the house. In one of the paintings, there hung a rather aggressive gentleman with an axe. Edward even thought he was watching after him. "Don't you dare, buddy." Edward mumbled at him and headed further down the corridor. As soon as he took a few steps, an axe was thrown at his back. "Damn!" Carnby turned to face the painting, but there was no change in it. "You forced me, mate." With a heavy heart, Edward hung the Indian rug over the painting. "I had to part with such an excellent carpet." Before he could reach the end of the corridor, the Indian from the picture opposite shot him with a bow. "Do you want a duel? You will get it." Edward drew his bow and shootout ensued. the Indian was defeated. The door at the end of the corridor led apparently to Jeremy's bedroom. There he discovered a fake book, like those used as a mechanism for secret passages. The floor around the clock was slightly scratched. Apparently there was a hiding place. After moving the long case clock, Edward discovered the key and a note from a certain Hubertus the Bold, called the Creatures of the Night. It warned about the spirit called the Vagabond.
Of libraries. Unhappy he who frees the prowler. Unhappy he who meets the prowler erring among the books. He generates the vagabond that comes from other spheres. He believes the vagabond does not exist. He will feel the embrace of death, for in the eyes of the vagabond, books are no more than dreams, stone no more than wind. The vagabond knows how to take the breath of the reckless.
Gulping, Edward headed towards the entrance to the library. It was pitch black inside. He needed the help of a lamp. The light from the lamp dimly illuminated the dusty room. Taking a couple of steps toward the bookcase, Edward felt a chill run down his spine. Turning around, he saw the vagabond seem to materialize in the air and move towards him. "I need to run! There must be a secret passage here!" And indeed, running past the back rows, he saw strange-looking shelves. Not far from them, there was some kind of a mechanism, just right for his fake book. He inserted the book and ran into the secret room, taking the lantern with him. The vagabond could not get into the room. Apparently, the pentagram near the entrance did not let him through. The room was littered with all sorts of occult junk, but his attention was attracted by a talisman emitting an unusual glow. If this symbol prevents evil from entering the room, then it would be nice to have a talisman with it, Edward thought, and put it in the pocket. He found some torn pages of Otto Stern about sacrificial daggers. He read that the only way to send the vagabond into his own dimension is to poke him with sinusoidal dagger, which on a full moon was dipped 7 times in the water, distilled 100 times. Fortunately, just such a thing was lying around on the next shelf. In reflections on the power of the verb, Edward read the warning. As one could expect, not every book is safe for reading in this library.
I will go further and say that simple reading of some of the more technical passages describing specific practices is in itself a perilous exercise. The ill-prepared reader can easily fall prey to attacks of demented hysteria, not unlike those described in cases of individuals said to be possessed by evil spirits.
Armed with a ritual blade, Edward managed to expel the vagabond from this dimension and began to study the library, hoping to shed some light on the mystery of the estate. In 1918, a certain Pickford bought up Ledoux's land after the poor fellow had ruined himself in unfortunate speculation. Pickford soon turned out to be the most loathsome human we had ever encountered. He was an adventurer of the worst kind, novo-rich, and bloated with grotesque sense of self-importance. First came the incessant army of men with shovels, digging into the mountains of earth that was to fill the surrounding swamp. It was learned from a slave that the final objective was to connect the existing caves with another one of gigantic proportions. Racked by a mania of persecution, Elijah Pickford constantly fired his workers and hired new ones. He did all he could to keep anyone from learning about his plans. There were rumors that detestable neighbor had been a sailor, a ruffian grown rich on questionable trade. When the work was finished, Pickford mentioned Derceto. He said to his neighbors that Derceto reminds him of Astarte, the fertility goddess. Around here, it is also known as Shab Niggurath. In June of 1862, Derceto was burned down during a skirmish with Union soldiers. Neighbors witnessed how servants were rushing into the flames to try and save their master. After that terrible night, Derceto fell into ruin, and its blackened walls were soon overgrown. In 1875, the property was eventually bought by a gentleman whose name was Howard Hartwood. It was Hartwood who told that Pickford had commanded a ship that flew the flag of piracy. He was fascinated by Pickford and undertook a great deal of research in an attempt to find some treasure that he was convinced the pirate had hidden. He went through the ruins inch by inch. He then had the burnt-out house rebuilt exactly as it had been and refurbished the library that had been miraculously escaped the flames on the night of the Great Fire. What happened to Hartwood and his son we already aware. It was necessary to find out more about Pickford, the founder of Derceto, a wealthy landowner, a pirate who clearly understood the occult. In the cellar, Edward found a translation of Astarte's ship's log made by Howard himself. It described the tribunal of the pirate brotherhood over the captain of Astarte, Ezekiel Prext, who hid his countless treasures without sharing with others. There were rumors that Prext was associated with black magic, human sacrifice, and voodoo rituals. They said that he made a deal with the devil himself, after which his crew hid one juicy loot after another. Ultimately, Prext abandoned his pirate life, declaring that he had found a treasure more valuable than the purest gold. Is it possible that Pickford and Prext are the same person? Is this pirate really behind all the atrocities in this house? He should be long dead. Even if his spirit is still alive, then why does he need all this? These questions haunted Cornby. Walking into the next room, he realized that thoughts tend to materialize. Waving his saber, Prext walked straight towards him. Cornby could only gather his courage and take the fight. This is not the end. Something is wrong. Yes, Ezekiel had vanished, but the darkness that shrouded the house was still there. Edward went into the next room and, indeed, the trace of evil spirits had not disappeared. It was a ballroom in which the ghostly dancers stood motionless, blocking the mantelpiece on which the key was visible. Dead dancers need the dance of death. Edward put on the record, and ghosts began to dance. Having the key to the unknown chest, there was only one place left that had not been explored: the caves under the house, where Howard Hartwood died, where pirate treasures were kept, terrible monsters lurked, and the root of the estate's evil, Captain Prext, hid. Returning to Jeremy's office, Edward opened the secret passage into the caves, using the saber he found earlier, and began his descent into darkness. Once in the cave, Edward knew that he had to act quickly if he didn't want to repeat the fate of the Hartwoods. In the depths of the cave, the detective found a chest. Opening it with the key from the ballroom, he discovered a gem and the pirate's logbook.
Memoirs of a Lost Soul.
The mask must fall. You who discover this manuscript understand this. I am here at your side. I am waiting in the darkness of my crypt. Soon you will belong to me. One of my slaves wrote this document. I have lived for 3 centuries, and my name is Ezekiel Prext, or Elijah Pickford. You may choose which to call me. I do not hide out of fear. My power is immense. I have sailed the 7 seas. My ship, the Astarte, spread terror through all the continents. The corsairs judged me like the Welsh judges of 1620, but they could not destroy me, and neither could the pirates. Now, I am immobilized. Damned Yankees! Witchcraft, voodoo, and the Cthulhu cult. I know them all. I have reigned and implored the stones. Only the Catonian haunts the cavern and resists me, but he dare not attack. I have need of a living body to regenerate myself. The Heartwoods managed to escape from me, but you who are reading these words, you will yield to my embrace. I hear your ragged breath and smell the stench of your fear. I have vanquished death. I built Derceto. I know what it is to wait. Cthulhu helps me. My servants will lay you upon the sacrificial stone. My roar will rend the night. You will be mine, and I shall reign once more. Come to me.
The last piece of the puzzle fell into place. That's why Prext needed the Heartwoods, and that's why he hunted Edward, preventing him from leaving the house. But where Jeremy and Howard were unable to fight back and were forced to commit suicide, Carnegie was going to fight till the end. He was already close. Having gone further into the cave, he found himself in complete darkness. The lamplight showed a fork in the path, and after some time, Edward realized this is a labyrinth. Judging by the walls and structure of the maze, one could conclude that it was not of natural origin. It was built by man, and absolutely with a specific purpose: to disorient, suppress, and drive to despair the unfortunate soul that ended up here. This was the last frontier to the crypt. Edward didn't know how long he spent here, but suddenly, around the next turn, he came across the door, in which there was a hole with the same shape as the gem found earlier. He inserted the stone, and the door swung open, and he found himself in the tomb. In a half-flooded room, a disgusting creature appeared before him, a tree with a human silhouette. As Edward descended closer, the deep one emerged from the water, and the tree began to shoot fireballs. Edward rushed to the altar. To weaken Prext, he placed a protective medallion on the altar and threw the lamp directly at the tree. As soon as the flame touched the monster, it immediately burned, only managing to emit a terrible dying cry. The Deep Ones and other undead disappeared with him. The curse of Derceto was lifted, but this was not the time to celebrate. The cave began to collapse, and Carnaby had to hurry so not to be buried here along with Prext. The tunnel which Catonian had previously guarded led him to the cellar. He could not wait to leave the hated house. He ran into the hall, threw open the doors, and finally left this nightmare behind. Hey folks, Radio Nick is here. Thank you for watching this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please consider clicking the like button or maybe even subscribing if you want to see more. I will really appreciate that. And stay tuned for the next episode of The Walk and Talk. See you next time.